Top viewed Reddit revenge stories by R Pro Revenge, R Nuclear Revenge.
First one. You try to cut my team in half, so I outsourced your entire department. This story has 1.1 million views on KCC. Let's jump right in. This tale takes place over the course of many months and resulted in over 150 layoffs, all to save 22 IT techs from losing their jobs. I learned a long time ago that no one cares about the IT team at our company. They see us as those useless employees always complaining about rules. We are a mortgage company, and those rules are the rules everyone follows to protect customer data privacy and to prevent theft. When your company suddenly loses 2 full payments for a house to some scammer in Nigeria and the FTC has questions for you, then it's time to change your policies. This meant cutting legacy access, revoking unnecessary access, and correcting coding job titles in Active Directory to prevent people from granting their own access. What this boiled down to was a meeting that I phoned into a year ago. This was one of those meetings where I did not need to be there. Budget meetings. In this meeting, the VP over the accounting department played a recording showing times when someone in the IT tech team provided subpar service. She tried using this as a reason to fire half of the tech team. The trouble was that all of the people she played recordings of were already fired for giving terrible customer service. These people were replaced by 5-star techs who know what they're doing and give excellent customer service. This started the whole chain of events that led to last week. Since this meeting was every 2 months, VP has tried to use her position and influence to grow her team while shrinking ours. Every budget meeting, I would show up, and VP, who shall hence be referred to as Karen, would target my team. I would pull out the numbers and pull out the logs showing how my team received a little over 3/4 of that team's call volume. I show how my team of 22 techs personally receive more phone calls than every other inbound call employee by more than double the number. I show how, with the call volume we receive, we still maintain a 98% satisfaction rating. At the 3rd budget meeting, the COO had been tired of hearing the same excuses and wanted hard data. He had a point. I was merely throwing out basic numbers without providing real data. Our company was in the middle of a budget crisis and someone needed to be cut. These budget meetings were basically a way to defend our own department from the chopping block. Karen believed that the best defense was a good offense. She was right, but not in the way she thought. When it became clear that the IT support team was on the chopping block, Karen starts to have her employees call into the tech center and have them make requests that she knows we cannot assist with, as that is handled by another company entirely. We are not able to transfer calls to an external line, so the only thing we can do is give the number to call and hang up. The negative CSATs start to flood in after this. Every single call from that team regarding a vendor's password reset gets a negative CSAT. Our approval rating tanked to 72% in 1 day. I instantly took action. First, I contacted a few of the users on recorded calls and asked them why they called the IT tech team when they know we're not capable of resetting the vendor's password. She replied that she was told it was policy to do that now. I asked why she left a negative satisfaction rating, and she said that those no longer count against the employee, that those are only used for macro metrics. I walked over to Karen's office and walked in. Karen, why are you having your team call mine to reset vendor's password? Karen looked confused and stated that she did no such thing. She said she would talk to her team and make sure that they call the correct number in the future. The calls did not stop. Now, a few of her team were calling in with personal machines that were not an asset of our company. They were wanting things done which would violate license agreements with Microsoft or Dell. Each of these were refused, and each of these were leaving a negative CSAT. It became clear that Karen was trying to tank our stats before the next budget meeting. I let my boss know, and he just gives me a sly smile. The leash is off. Sick her. This isn't an inside joke between us, as I am someone who is very detail-oriented when I am focused. When you try to get my team fired because you want to grow your useless team, I am very focused on you now. The first thing I do is enable call recording for every corporate employee, as to not arouse her suspicions. Her team did not have call recording enabled because her team handles CDP on a daily basis. I pull a live call and listen in. This is employee with our company. May I have your account number or your name? The customer gives the name. Okay, I have your account pulled up. Are you willing to make a payment? Customer says yes. Are you authorizing me to go ahead and make the withdrawal from the bank account we have on file? Customer agrees. Okay, payment is processing. You'll be notified in X days when it is complete. Your next due date is this date. The customer thanks her and he hangs up. Entire phone call was 1 minute 22 seconds. Short phone call, so I listen to another. Similar situation. I listen to another and get the same thing. I start seeing a pattern here. So I go through the rapidly building log and see that all of the phone calls are usually less than 1 minute and 20 seconds long. It takes well over an hour before an anomaly occurs, and I see a 5-minute phone call. The customer needed an extension, and the employee was authorized to give her a 30-day extension to avoid a late fee if she would make a double payment next month. The person on the phone agreed. At this point, I also turned on the CSAT for her team only. I expected a largely similar rating as my team. I was not prepared for the nearly instant 50% rating that steadily dropped. My boss comes over to my desk as he was getting the email notifications for the sub 75% CSAT rating and was flabbergasted at the sheer volume of negative reports. It's now clear that there is no choice but to examine this further. I assign 4 people to review the negative calls from the other team and have them all. The amount of employees being downright rude to customers, not other employees, but paying customers, over the phone was shocking. The negative tones in their voice, the unwillingness to fully answer questions, the extreme lack of empathy, and the shocking lack of mute button use was too much. Then came another shocker. The number of customer-facing employees was ridiculous. 152 employees to handle roughly 30% more calls than my team of 22. I called the CIO. What you got for me? I have something for you. It's incredibly evil, depressingly accurate, and can probably save the company a ridiculous amount of money. You know, this is the second time you have said those exact words to me, right? Yep, but there's something I need to know first. I am not currently authorized to know it, and I need to request it in a way that would not set off any red flags. What is that? The starting pay scale for all account employees. Tell me your plan. The next budget meeting was not a budget meeting. It was an IT tech defend yourself meeting. The COO directed it and let Karen speak first. Karen pulled out the same stuff as before. Calls upon calls to our group that were cherry-picked, as well as listing off dead zone times when we had people working but no one calling in. Then went on about how they could cut our group in half and hire more account employees to reduce the workflow. Instead of defending myself or my department, I played 4 of the short call recordings from Karen's department. I then pulled up the Excel sheet that was color-coded, showing how many phone calls each account rep received and the length of time they were on, each call, and the customer satisfaction rating. I explained the lack of high CSAT with my own little recording I like to call a failtage. It's a montage of fail, and her team were the stars. Before you ask, I did put music to it. The recording starts off with an employee saying, "Yeah, I guess I can take your payment," then goes straight into one where a customer accidentally gave the wrong bank account info and said, "Don't use that one." The rep responded with, "Christ, what is the actual account number?" It only got worse from there. This group was unmanaged for so long they were filled with rude and useless employees. I then showed them a side-by-side comparison of each tech who received a call. I showed how my techs were receiving more than 4 times the number of calls per rep than her team was getting per day. I showed how we all were on the phone for well over 7 times the amount of time her team was on the phone for, and I demonstrated how each tech had double or triple the satisfaction rating over all of her group. Half the room that was uninterested in the conversation were suddenly interested when I closed out my presentation. In short, I saw no reason to defend the IT team today, as I have successfully done so in every prior meeting. Since the last meeting, however, Karen has crossed the line and has had her team call mine in regards to things we have no access to. I played the recording of me calling her minion. As you can see here, she directed her team to call mine and to leave bad satisfaction ratings on my guys because of it. I have since deleted those CSATs as they serve no purpose whatsoever. I then pulled out my next flowchart. This is the monthly expense taken from the last 9 meetings that our company spends on IT and servicing departments. I look at the COO, who was looking at me intently. Before today, I was on the defensive as I saw no reason to attack another group. But it is clear to me now that my team has a target on its back. That is why I now show you this. It was a graph showing the starting pay scale for each IT and servicing employee code, as well as their average daily workflow. There was one glaring anomaly on this list. Account department had the highest starting pay scale with the least amount of work. So basically, in layman's terms, the account department can reduce to 1/10 of its current size, and we can reduce the pay scale to a little over 1/2, as this department requires very little in the way of problem solving and critical thinking. I saw a few raised eyebrows as well as one impressed smile from the CIO. The COO ushers everyone out of the room except for me, my direct supervisor, and the CIO. He looked at me and said, "Continue." Further, we can cut this department entirely and outsource them instead of IT. Since this group merely takes payments and sometimes allows extensions, we do not have to worry too much about technical ability. Outside of simply using Windows, we can hire high schoolers if we wanted to. This got a laugh from the CIO. Karen was staring through the window with this smug grin on her face the entire time. Now, for my final bit for this meeting, I'm going to play 2 cherry-picked phone calls. These are the 2 most technical phone calls I could find from the last month for both departments. I play a call where a payment fails to process and the rep realizes she typed in the wrong number. I then play a call where it starts out with a user stating that her customer submitted a payment to the wrong CD. The tech breaks out into our procedure to prevent wire fraud. Thanks to the quick action of this tech, we were able to reverse the CD and save this customer from losing their down payment. The final masterful stroke was playing my final card. As you all know, Karen has been coming after my team for months. She has been grinding her axe against us because she, like everyone else, has made the mistake that we are incompetent, inept, and useless to the company. What she did not know was that I have all of the logs showing the truth. The smoke she has been blowing for years is so thick that it's ridiculous. Her team is highly replaceable, and we both know my team would require extensive training and effort to replace. The CIO spoke up. With just 30 people, we can outsource her entire department and save the company millions a year. The next time we have a major IT issue, you will be regretting outsourcing us. He then pointed to the graphs and flowcharts brought by both myself and Karen. Her team is useless. The next day, I watched in pure joy as a term request came in for Karen. It came in with the double asterisk indicator at the beginning, meaning this was a stealth term, to be done and coordinated with the person who will inform her of the termination. It's not actually double asterisk, I changed that for here to protect identities. Over the next 2 months, the account team was shuttered. First, they came for anyone with disciplinary issues or attendance issues. Then, they laid off anyone who had been there a really long time. Then, the newest employees. The smart ones applied for other positions in the company or left before getting laid off. All the while, the calls for payments were slowly shunted to the call center in India. By the end of last week, we only have 4 domestic accounts people who take escalations that the India call center is not authorized to take. Do I feel guilty about being integral for 148 people being laid off? Yes, quite. But I know it was necessary to keep my job and my health insurance. Without my health insurance, I am a dead man. The entire reason why this happened, though, was because a division was slated to be cut and sent to India from the outset. Thanks to the actions of myself and my direct supervisor, we prevented it from being a sure thing that our team was going to get cut. On top of that, we cut out a festering wound in the company that was slowing it down and costing it money. My team has not been brought up in the budgetary meetings since. There's a saying, you don't poke a hornet's nest unless you have a flamethrower. Unfortunately for Karen, she only had a stick. On to our next story. Greedy stepmom stole my inheritance and my house, so I nuked her career and life. By Felicia. This story had 1 million views on the KCC channel. Let's jump right in. My mom died giving birth to me, so I never knew her. She looks pretty in pictures. Dad says she was a good woman, and I believe him. He was a good dad and raised me by himself with the help of my aunt until I was 11. My aunt has her own kids that are a few years older than me, but we were all friends growing up and still are, which includes my aunt. Like my mom, my aunt is a good woman. My dad worked crazy long hours to provide for me. He owned his own convenience store. He was manager and cashier for most of the day and had one other employee as his helper. I was just a kid, but would also help at the store after school, sweeping and stocking shelves. For the longest time, my dad's helper was a Chinese guy, but then he had to quit because he had to take care of his ailing parents in China. So my dad replaced him with a white guy who did okay for a while, but then he graduated college and moved on. Finally, my dad hired a Chinese woman to be his helper, and this woman would eventually become his second wife and my stepmom. I will call her Barbara though. Of course, her name isn't actually Barbara. Barbara was only 15 years older than me, so she was a lot younger than my dad, who was 44, and she was like 26. She also didn't speak Chinese the same dialect at first, which was inconvenient for our convenience store because we lived in a Chinese part of town where most of the customers were Chinese Mandarin, and only once in a while white or black people come in, so her English wasn't such an advantage. Barbara was nice to me at first, so I thought she was a good person. I was not yet 12 when they got married, and she moved into our house. From what I know about her, her family is quite wealthy in China, and they paid for a nice wedding, and they all came to America for it. My dad was the sort of guy never to let anyone pay his way though, so he kept on working like a maniac every day. Once they got married, Barbara changed, at least towards me. She was no longer big sis like she tried to portray herself when she and my dad were dating, where she treated me as a peer, but now she was super strict and controlling. She no longer let me help out around the shop like before. It's not like Cinderella, where the mom would force the kid to do all this work, but she did tend to isolate me from my father. Over the next few years, she convinced my dad to sponsor all sorts of her relatives and friends to come over to China to live in America. He would set these people up with businesses because even though my dad wasn't rich, he was very bright and knew how to make money. They would open little restaurants, dry cleaners, cell phone repair shops, things like that. Pretty much all the little foreign mom and pop shops you see in any small town, my dad helped make those things. Except the owners were Chinese guys. When I was 17, my dad developed lung cancer due to smoking heavily ever since he was 13. He died only 2 years later at only 52. When I was a kid, I always had in mind to one day take over my dad's store when he retired. Now that I was 19, I was still too young to sell liquor, but I thought surely Barbara will let me work in the store now that my dad was gone. No such luck. She had one of her adult cousins take over the store, and the guy hired his own friends and family to work in it. So, the store my dad built from nothing was no longer part of my life. Barbara also had my dad fix his will so that she got almost all of his money, which again, although he wasn't Bill Gates rich, was several hundreds of thousands of dollars. I didn't really care about the money. Barbara can have it. But it still sucks she got all his money and her family is already rich. I think she was just using my dad to transport her clan from China to America, but that's just my theory. All the money in the world cannot pay to bring my dad back, and I'd rather have that than cash. But I digress. However, after saying all that, I will admit my dad set aside a small trust for me that was enough to put me through junior college. Also, the minute I turned 18, Barbara threw me out of the house my dad bought and paid for with his hard work. This is not a place for you. You go now. Bye-bye. She owned it because she was his wife. And now that my dad was dead, Barbara could move her new boyfriend into the house in his place. Her new boyfriend was a big, fat scumbag from Taiwan who from what I hear was a big shot mobster in his home country, but in America, he just played mahjong all day and lived off his wife's money in my dad's house. Honestly, I think he was hanging out in America to avoid gang trouble in Asia. Also, I think my stepmom got with him because he has connections in China and Taiwan, and maybe some fraud is going on. Before I got kicked out of my dad's house, my stepmom used my dad's money to invest in a couple of apartment buildings. I eventually heard that she was renting out rooms to various traffickers, and basically they were bordellos. This was all stuff I found out later, along with the news that she not only made big money off rents, but the traffickers were giving her a kickback on money they earned. I will say this for Barbara, she's a very beautiful woman physically, and it's easy to see why my father was attracted to her, though if I think of her as not my stepmom, she personally does nothing for me. She often got men to do what she wanted because she was pretty. I'm also quite certain that she gave them more than eye candy, but aside from one very important case, I cannot prove it. What was that case? Well, I moved in with my nice aunt, who sheltered me while I went to college for a degree in computer engineering. My smaller inheritance paid for a couple of years of school. My aunt was nice to me, and even though she was still taking care of her own children, she had one son who already married and had his own family, but 3 daughters who still lived at home and were unmarried. She didn't ask me for rent. Her own husband had passed away long ago, so I got to play man of the house, taking care of the yard and fixing things like cars and computers while I lived there. After a couple of years, I lost touch with Barbara and just concede that she won. I also got a job at a computer hobby store where I am soup upper of computers to make them go fast. It's good experience, and though the money isn't so great, at least hey, it's some money. And I'm starting to make a name of myself in the world, or at least in our small city. When I say small city, I really do mean small city, and it is even smaller in sense that Chinese people in that city tend to live all in one part of it, and everyone knows one another. Eventually, I meet my own girlfriend Kay, who is much the same age as me and going to school to be a nurse. After Kay and I am dating a few months, I start to meet her family. She knows about my living situation, that I live with my aunt, and that I have a mean stepmom who threw me out of my dad's house. But I never said Barbara's real name before. So I met Kay's family, and she has an older brother Mike who is about 26. Mike is Chinese like all of us, but he is very heavily tattooed, and he had spent some time in prison because he was a banger as a teenager and did time until he was early 20s. He worked for a landscaping company cutting grass and all that. He is what we call in our neighborhood a cowboy, but I don't know how accurate that translates in English to what I'm trying to say he is. Well, anyway, after coming to Kay's house and seeing him around a couple of times, Mike overhears me answer one of Kay's questions about my stepmom, and Barbara's name comes up. Mike is saying, "Oh, excuse me, May. Hey, OP, did you say Barbara's real name?" In my neighborhood, everyone calls their little sister May. So I say, "Yeah, that's my stepmom." "Oh," he tells me, "no offense, OP, but I'm effing your stepmom." No way. Evidently, Mike has sex with all sorts of women in the neighborhood and outside of it too. He brags about all the white and black and Mexican ladies he also landscapes. I haven't really thought about my stepmom other than talking about stuff in the past, so it was interesting hearing what she was up to. I mean, other than effing my girlfriend's brother. Mike tells us that Barbara uses her apartment building as a giant cat house where pimps set up their women. Barbara never actually told him this, but he deduced it like an Asian thug version of Sherlock Holmes. He says that a lot of people he knew in prison got put in jail that way. Also, that my stepmom was running for a seat for city council, playing up the fact that she was a hardworking woman of color, blah blah blah, and had aspirations for even higher office. It's clear she wanted to make herself a little empire. Kay asks her brother if he would help us put my stepmom in jail. She had her account set up, so it was really hard to prove she actually knew exactly what her tenants were doing in her buildings. But anyway, if the buildings were shut down, it would at least hurt Barbara's cash flow, and it would put an end to at least some abuse of women. Mike said that he would have kept his mouth shut because he liked that my stepmom was basically showering him with money so that he could keep giving her the D, but since his little sister was asking for help, he was willing to forego the money. I piped up and offered to pay him, even though no way I could pay as much as Barbara. He said, "It's fine. You don't need to pay me anything, but if you hurt my little sister, I'll cut your balls off." Deal. So our plan we came up with was that Mike would set up his cell phone in an out-of-sight place in Barbara's room while they had sex. Basically, a sex tape. Without her knowledge, Mike didn't care about his reputation in America and had plans to leave the country again anyway and go back to China, as his own father had a business opportunity for him there. The idea of being in a porn didn't bother him at all. Having spent time in jail and also being part of a gang subculture, he also didn't have any trouble scoring drugs, and evidently he did these drugs with Barbara all the time in her house. So on the day he made a porn at her house, he also made sure to show that Barbara was doing drugs. He minimized his role so that it appeared that it was Barbara who scored the drugs and was offering them to him. He did make sure, at my suggestion, to have her say in natural conversation what day and year it was, and that this was her passed away husband's house, and that her current boyfriend was playing mahjong at a friend's house. Furthermore, Mike added a special touch where, in the throes of sex, he made Barbara denounce her Taiwan boyfriend as a weakling and a fool, not a real man, that only Mike was capable of giving her an orgasm. Really hair-raising stuff, laugh out loud. All of it was in Chinese, but that was okay, as the audience would also be Chinese. Mike made sure that the video clearly showed Barbara's face. The video was obviously not a professionally made porn, so thankfully we did not have to actually see any clear private parts, but it was very obvious what was going on in the film. All told, the video was 20 minutes long. We edited out most of the sex portions because those were unimportant really. When I say we, I mean Mike and me, because of course Kay didn't want to look at her own brother in a porn. I didn't care to see Barbara either, and thankfully I didn't really have to see any clear picture of her naked, though it was obviously her, and she was obviously naked. We shaved the video down to those parts where it was clearly showing Barbara's face, her doing drugs, talking about drugs, and offering them to Mike, her mentioning the date and that this was her passed away husband's house, them in bed for a few seconds obviously doing it, and the funny part where she made fun of her Taiwanese boyfriend. The relevant video clip we made was slightly less than 10 seconds long. A few days later, Mike went to China to meet up with his parents. A week after that, as politics go, candidates often have to make speeches in front of audiences, and Barbara, running for a seat in the city council, was no different. Nobody really cares about city council meetings except other politicians and the few dozen people who go to such things. Reading up on her quickly, I learned that Barbara was presenting herself as a woman of high character, a business owner who had set up more than a dozen successful businesses in the area for other immigrants. So basically, stealing credit for my father's work. But back to boring political meetings, they're definitely snoozer, but if something interesting happens, such as the politician saying something Hitler would say, someone getting assassinated, or I don't know, an attractive candidate suddenly, randomly appearing in a porn for all to see in real time, news travels fast. So on the day that Barbara was making her little speech in front of maybe 100 people at a local hotel conference room, the public was invited. Oh look, her boyfriend, the Mahjong King, was there too, and all of Barbara's cousins that my dad had sponsored to America and set up for businesses were there too. Nobody took notice of the young guy in dark sunglasses and beanie sitting in the front row holding a backpack. Even more so because the room was darkened except for the stage. Barbara was going to be the fourth speaker out of maybe 6. While the first speaker made his speech, I silently slid a bazooka Bluetooth speaker out of my backpack and put it near the stage. Such a speaker is about 20 inches tall, 8 diameter, and when set to maximum can be quite loud. I tested it at home to make sure, yep, it would do. As I predicted, the level of excitement of the first 3 speakers was like as entertaining as listening to Jessica Simpson try to rap, so it was really a trial to wait for Barbara's turn. So she finally gets on stage and talks about being a good family woman and so on. I pull out my smartphone and use its projector app along with a homemade projector box I built at work so that it could make a nice big image on the close behind wall. 10 seconds of Barbara telling us where she was, what date it was, how delicious ecstasy is, what a cuck her boyfriend is, and oh god, fuck me, Mikey. Nice and loud. Thanks, Bazooka Speaker. The audience is so stunned. I have time to loop the video and play it again. Barbara is standing there with her mouth open, eyes wide. Someone in the crowd yells out in Chinese, "Hey, that's Mike." Everyone knows Mike, especially a lot of the ladies. Just as the crowd is starting to reach a crescendo, I grab my speaker and projector box, stuff them into the backpack, and slip out a side door where Kay is waiting with her car running. Before I made this getaway, I made sure to shout out, "This is not a place for you, Barbara. You go now. Bye-bye." I then went to Kay's house and we were so happy we got engaged. By that weekend, I was packed up and moving with Kay to stay with her uncle who lived in a big house near my new school where I am now finishing my degree. Kay is now a full RN. She brings most of the money, but soon I'll play a bigger role too. From what my aunt tells me, Barbara and her boyfriend broke up. And by broke up, I mean she fled the city because he literally wants to kill her. She lost her bid for city council, obviously. Thanks to an anonymous tip, her bordello apartments were also shut down. Because of Barbara's shame, lots of her relatives who own businesses thanks to my dad lost customers. And a few have already gone out of business. The rest are failing fast. My dad's old house fell into foreclosure and now a nice white family lives there. They're the only white people on the block, so Godspeed, round eyes. Barbara's porn gif made the rounds on tons of people's Facebooks before it got deleted because of community guidelines. Mike shared this trailer all over the internet to people he knows, and in our neighborhood, everyone knows one another. Since it was only a few seconds, lots of people also posted it to their Instagram before it got deleted. Barbara's life is pretty much nuked. The full-length version got posted to various pay sites, but it hasn't leaked to any free streaming services. This is according to Mike. Never miss an opportunity to make some cash. Hey, yo dad, I forgive you for not leaving me that much other than showing me how to be strong and to stand up for myself. That was the best inheritance of all. See you in heaven, unless this stunt makes me for hell instead. Love, OP. OP, I'm sorry you lost both of your parents at such a young age. It sounds like your aunt is a wonderful person though. I hope you know that, and I hope she knows that as well. I hope you all enjoyed revisiting the two most popular. I want to thank both OPs for posting their stories to the. Enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.